Welcome to Stuff Works Explained. If you are here for the first time, please consider subscribing to this channel. In this video, we'll be talking about Tanzania and Uganda plan to build a regional or Tanga Regional Energy Hub. This after Dangote chose Lamu. Now Tanzania and Uganda are building their answer, which is around Tanga. When Aliko Dangote chose Lamu in Kenya for his proposed 700k barrel per day refinery, Tanzania did not get the refinery it had hoped for. But the bigger story may be what happened next. Instead of allowing Lamu to become East Africa's undisputed energy gateway, Tanzania and Uganda are strengthening a different corridor, one that links Uganda oil fields to Tanzania Indian Ocean coast and seeks to turn Tanga into regional center for storage, refining, logistics, trading and distribution. This is the story of that response. It's a story about oil, ports and infrastructure, but it is also a story about strategic positioning. Because in East Africa, petroleum infrastructure is not simply about moving crude oil from one place to another. It is about deciding where crude is processed, where fuel is stored, where it is traded, ports that clears it, which companies provide the logistics, and ultimately, which countries captures the economic activity generated along the supply chain. And after Dangote selected Lamu, the stakes became considerably higher. Dangote chose Lamu. Tanzania had wanted Tanga. Dangote's decision to locate his proposed mega refinery in Lamu gave Kenya a potentially powerful new position in the regional petroleum market. The planned refinery, with a proposed capacity of around 700,000 barrels per day, would be one of the largest industrial energy projects in the region. For Kenya, this is more than another investment. It could strengthen Lamu emergence as an energy and logistics center on the Indian Ocean. For Tanzania, however, the decision closed a door. Tanga had been among the locations considered for the project. This is where the regional story takes a turn, because Tanzania already had another strategic asset in its hand, Uganda. Uganda changed that equation. Uganda is not just Tanzania's neighbor. It is becoming an oil-producing country, and its petroleum future is physically connected to Tanzania. The East African Crude Oil Pipeline, or basically known as EACOP, is being developed to transport crude oil from Uganda's oil-producing region around Lake Albert to the Chongoleani area near Tanga. The pipeline is approximately 1,443 kilometers long. That means Uganda crude is already being tied to Tanzania's coast. And that creates the foundation for something much bigger than a pipeline. It creates the possibility of an energy corridor. Uganda brings the crude, Tanzania provides the route to the sea, Tanga provides the coastal platform. The commercial opportunity is obvious. But after Lamu, that opportunity takes a more competitive character. The retaliation is in the infrastructure. Neither Tanzania nor Uganda needs to stand at the podium and declare we are retaliating against Dangote. Governments rarely describe infrastructure competition that way. The more revealing response is what countries actually build. And the direction of the Tanzania-Uganda relationship points towards an unmistakable strategic answer. If Lamu is going to become a major refining and energy center, Tanga will need to become something more than a crude export terminal. This is the logic behind the push for Tanga Regional Energy Hub. The proposed hub is designed around much wider petroleum ecosystem: storage, refining, logistics, trading and distribution. In other words, Tanzania is simply trying to replace it's not simply trying to replace one refinery that went elsewhere. It is trying to build the infrastructure around Tanga that can make the city commercially important across multiple stages of the petroleum value chain. That is much more sophisticated response. Tanzania and Uganda have something Lamu does not have. They have each other. This is where Tanzania-Uganda partnership becomes the center of the story. Kenya has Lamu, Tanzania has Tanga, but Tanzania also has a direct petroleum relationship with Uganda. That relationship is already embedded in EACOP. Uganda needs routes for its crude oil. Tanzania needs major volumes of oil and petroleum activity moving through its territory and ports. The two interests fit together, and that makes Tanga's strategy less about one investment and more about building a system. Think of it as a chain. We have Uganda Oil, EACOP, Tanga, storage, processing, trading, distribution, and regional markets. The more of that chain Tanzania and Uganda can control or participate in, the greater the economic value generated between them. This is the heart of the response to Lamu. The objective is not simply another refinery. That distinction is important. A refinery is one major asset. An energy hub is an ecosystem. It can include petroleum storage terminals, pipelines, transport services, processing facilities, trading operations, port services, and distribution networks. The strategic calculation for Tanzania is therefore clear. If Dangote's refinery gives Lamu a major downstream asset, Tanzania can respond by making Tanga indispensable to a different part of the regional petroleum system. And Uganda is critical to making that strategy work. Uganda provides the resource base and growing domestic market. Tanzania provides the maritime gateway. Together, they can build a corridor that competes for petroleum flows without needing to replicate every element of the Lamu model. Then we have Vitol, or is it Vital, entering the picture. The involvement of Vitol gives this strategy another dimension. Vitol is the world's largest independent energy and commodity trading company, managing the logistics, distribution, and marketing of crude oil, refined products, and natural gas globally. Founded in 1966 in Rotterdam, Netherlands, it is highly secretive, privately held corporation owned by roughly 400 of its senior employees, with major operations hubs in Geneva, Switzerland, London, Houston, and Singapore. In 2025, the company reported a turnover of $343 billion, according to Reuters. Its significance is not simply its financial size. Vitol operates across the physical energy trading chain, buying, selling, transporting, and arranging the movement of petroleum and other energy commodities around the world. Why is Vitol important to Uganda? This is where the story becomes particularly interesting. Uganda has made Vitol part of its emerging petroleum supply chain. In December 2025, Uganda's national oil company, UNOC, signed financial agreements allowing it to borrow up to $2 billion from Vitol Bahrain EC over 7 years. According to UNOC, the financing will support projects across petroleum value chain, including a new petroleum storage facility in Namwambula, Mpigi district, expansion of Jinja petroleum terminal, extension of petroleum products pipeline from Kenya, refinery-related developments, and other national and regional logistics infrastructure. That is significant development because it puts Vitol much closer to the physical infrastructure of Uganda's petroleum industry. And there is another important element. Vitol Bahrain already has operating fuel supply relationship with UNOC. Reuters reported that Vitol Bahrain was supplying refined petroleum products to UNOC, which then distribute them to retailers in Uganda. So the relationship has several layers. There is financing, petroleum supply, logistics, as well as infrastructure. That is considerably more strategic than normal supply relationship. And this is where Tanzania comes in. Vitol's involvement in Uganda gives Tanzania-Uganda energy relationship another dimension. Uganda is developing its own petroleum production and refinery capacity, while its crude export system is connected to Tanzania through EACOP, which terminates near Tanga. At the same time, Uganda is using Vitol to strengthen storage, supply, and petroleum infrastructure. That creates the possibility of an increasing integrated regional system. Uganda oil production, we have EACOP, we have Tanga, and then there is storage, terminals and logistics. There is refining and petroleum products. There is Vitol and other infrastructure trading networks, and then we have the East Africa's market. This is why Vitol matters in the wider Tanga story. Vitol is not the same thing as a traditional major oil. Companies such as Total Energies, Shell, ExxonMobil are commonly associated with upstream oil exploration and production, large-scale refining, and consumer fuel businesses. Vitol's historical strength is different. It is fundamentally a trading and physical energy company. Its competitive advantage is knowing where the energy is available, where it is needed, how to move it, how to finance transactions, and how to connect the two sides of the market, demand and supply. That makes Vitol particularly useful in countries that are trying to build into integrated petroleum system. Why Tanzania should care about Vitol? This is where, or this is there's a strategic implication here. If Tanga is to become more than a crude export terminal, Tanzania needs an ecosystem around its needs. There is storage, there is port, marine infrastructure, there are pipelines, there are refining or processing facilities, distribution networks, trading companies, international buyers and suppliers. Vitol's business model fits naturally into that ecosystem. It does not mean Vitol automatically becomes the operator of every part of Tanga Energy Hub. That should not be stated unless a specific agreement confirms it. What can be said is that Vitol's growing relationship with Uganda demonstrates that the company is already becoming involved in financing, supply, infrastructure side of the East Africa petroleum market. That makes its involvement strategically relevant because Tanzania and Uganda do not only need infrastructure. They need markets, traders, financing, supply relationships, and international commercial connections. Vitol operates precisely in that space. This is where the Lamu decisions becomes a catalyst. Lamu decision did not create Tanzania-Uganda Energy Corporation. That corporation already existed, but it changed the competitive context. Before Uganda's decision, or before Dangote's decision, Tanga could have been viewed primarily through the lens of EACOP and Uganda crude export. After Lamu, the strategic questions becomes much bigger. What happens if Kenya develops a major refinery at Lamu while Tanzania remains primarily transit route? That is the risk Tanzania had to confront. A country that merely moves crude through its territory captures less value than one that stores it, processes it, trades it, and also distributes the resulting product. So the Tanga strategy could be understood as Tanzania's attempt to move up the value chain. And Uganda has a strong reason to support that move. Uganda wants more options. Uganda's interest is not about exporting. It's not only about exporting crude. The country is a major consumer of petroleum products. For years, Uganda depended heavily on petroleum imports through Kenya. That dependence exposed the importance of a reliable supply routes. The development of Tanzania corridor gives Uganda another strategic option. Instead of having its petroleum future tied too closely to one coastal route, Uganda can deepen a second major relationship. That is good energy policy. It is also good geopolitics, and it gives Tanzania something Kenya cannot easily reproduce: a direct partnership with the country whose crude is at the center of the East Africa's emerging oil industry. The real contest is Tanga versus Lamu, but not quite. It would be too simplistic to describe this as a conventional Tanzania-Kenya rivalry. The competition is really between systems. Lamu is being positioned as a major refinery. Tanga is being positioned as a petroleum corridor connected to Uganda. Mombasa remains as an important regional petroleum gateway. Uganda is developing its own refinery and petroleum infrastructure, and international energy companies such as Vitol are increasingly involved in the commercial architecture surrounding this project. The result is an East Africa energy map in which ports, pipelines, refineries, storage facilities, and trade networks are beginning to overlap. The countries that build the strongest connection between those assets will have the greatest influence over regional petroleum flows. Tanzania's response is therefore bigger than Dangote. This is important point. Dangote decision may have denied Tanzania one enormous investment, but Tanzania still has an opportunity to build something that is commercially broader. A successful Tanga Energy Hub could serve multiple functions: storage, refining, trading, logistics, as well as distribution, and critically, Uganda crude oil exports. That creates several sources of economic value rather than depending on one refinery. For Uganda, the benefits are equally practical. The country gets coastal corridor for its crude, greater supply chain flexibility, and a potential regional partner in developing downstream petroleum infrastructure. The retaliation is therefore economic, not rhetorical. There may never be an official statement from Dodoma or Kampala saying that Tanga is a response to Dangote's Lamu decision. There does not need to be one. The more meaningful response is infrastructure strategy. Kenya has Lamu. Tanzania is strengthening Tanga. Uganda is tied to Tanga through EACOP. Vitol is becoming increasingly involved in Uganda petroleum supply and infrastructure financing. The pieces are beginning to fit together. This is how infrastructure competition actually works. Not necessarily through public declarations, through pipelines, through ports, storage tanks, refineries, through trading contracts, through financial agreements, and the long-term commercial relationship. The project management question now. The strategy is compelling on paper, but infrastructure is ultimately judged by delivery. Tanzania and Uganda will have to turn agreements into functioning assets. They will need financing, procurement, construction, regulations, coordination, and reliable supply and commercial viable operations. Tanga will have to offer efficient port services. Storage facilities will have to be built. Refining plants will have to move beyond announcement. Trading relationships will have to generate actual volumes, and the entire system will have to compete on cost, reliability, as well as speed. That is where the real battle will be decided, not at the announcement stage, at the execution. Now, let's look at the new East Africa energy map. Dangote's choice of Lamu has therefore produced an intended strategic consequence. It has made Tanzania's relationship with Uganda more important. The two countries now have an even stronger incentive to ensure that Tanga corridor becomes commercially competitive. Uganda has the oil, Tanzania has the coast, EACOP connects them. Tanga can provide that platform, and Vitol brings international trading and financing capability into wider Ugandan petroleum system. Put those pieces together and the message becomes clear. Dangote may have chosen Lamu, but Tanzania and Uganda have chosen to answer with a corridor. Not one refinery, not one investment, but a connected petroleum ecosystem running from Uganda oil fields to Tanga, and as well as onwards to the regional and international market. That is the retaliation worth watching, because the next phase of East Africa's energy competition will not be decided by who announces the biggest project. It will be decided on by who builds the most useful system and who gets the oil, infrastructure, traders, and markets moving through that system. So thank you for reaching this far. If you are here for the first time, please consider subscribing to this channel. You can also watch other videos that we have made on Lamu Port, the Dangote oil refinery, and other projects in East Africa and Africa at wide. So thank you, and let's meet in the next one.